Yay!
You did it. Hooray. Look at that big PW.
Welcome.
All right. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome to our first ever live stream of our introduction of our new for 2025 varieties of Proven Winners ColorChoice shrubs. These are the shrubs that you're going to find new in your garden center this season. And we want to take the opportunity to introduce you to them and give you a little breath of spring. So I'm Stacey, and I'm joined by my colleagues.
I'm Crimson Drager. I'm Kristina Howley.
And I'm Natalie Carmoli. And should I just take it over from here?
Yes.
All right. All right, I'm going to kick things off today by going over 8 of the 32 new Proven Winners ColorChoice shrubs, all that will be new to garden centers this spring. Now I, like all of my friends here, we're going to highlight some of the unique characteristics of each plant. So it's going to hopefully help you find the perfect fit for your nursery's assortment or for your home decor, your home landscape. So I'm going to start out with evergreens and shrubs that have interesting foliage, as you can see on the screen. These plants do the heavy lifting of providing color to your garden year-round, before blooming plants have started blooming and after they've finished their bloom at the end of the season. So they're also perfect companion plants. So while you follow along, think about how each might be useful along some of the classics like azaleas or hydrangeas or roses, how they might help complete your garden picture. So let's start off with our first evergreen. This is a broadleaf evergreen and it is Neatball Buxus. Now let's begin by talking about boxwood a little bit. Now you might have already heard of Sprinter, which is our fast-growing boxwood here at Proven Winners ColorChoice, and we're really excited to introduce this brand new boxwood, Neatball. While this isn't quite as fast-growing as Sprinter, it is a faster-growing specimen than conventional Buxus, but it has this nice low-mounded shape as opposed to Sprinter's upright habit. Now, it's not unusual for boxwood to grow in a kind of a tidy, dense, globe-like habit. But what makes Neatball extra special is, unlike conventional varieties like, say, green velvet, it's going to hold its deep color all through the season without getting bronze or brown during the end of the season. Now, being a broadleaf evergreen, cold weather isn't what typically damages boxwood. It's the quick changes in weather as the season progresses that causes it to burn. But Neatball Buxus has sailed through these weather changes without any problems in our trials, and these large dark green leaves always stay beautiful, glossy, and dark green. Now, at just 2 to 3 feet, this is a dwarf variety. It's got good growth, nice container presentation. It's really beautiful in any scenario. It's hardier than our other varieties that we have in our catalog right now, down to USDA Zone 4. So that's another plus for this little Neatball. It's also super deer resistant, and as you can see on the screen, it's part of our deer proof program. Now, anytime you see this on the screen or on a container, you know that this is highly resistant to browsing by deer. If you want to know more about the deer proof program, like the full list or any of the other characteristics of the program, you just have to go to provenwinnerscolorchoice.com and look for deer proof in the search bar. Okay, let's move to the next broadleaf evergreen, and I'm going to cover a couple at the same time. We've got Glow Pop and Glow Stick Ilex crenata. Now, these are 2 fine selections coming to us from the breeding program of Dr. Tom Ranney at NC State University. Both of these Japanese hollies will thrive in USDA Zone 5B through 8. And they can be planted in full to part sun. I like to call them a broadleaf evergreen that has ever gold, let's say, because of that gorgeous gold foliage. Like other Japanese holly, like we said, they can be planted in full shade to part sun, but you should note that increased sunlight is going to also give it more of that beautiful gold color. So let's take a quick look at Glow Pop. This grows as a tidy 2 to 3 foot ball and is perfect for those smaller spaces. And then moving on to Glow Stick, It's tall and narrow, and you can see that in this photo. It has a 1 foot wide, 4 to 6 foot tall columnar presentation. So there's a lot of great uses for plants that have this fastigiate presentation. Now, like other broadleaf evergreens, both of these Ilex crenata are going to prefer soil that's acidic. They like it to be moist and well drained. You can apply a slow release fertilizer or a layer of organic mulch around the base of them if you like each spring. For both of these, you're hardly ever going to have to prune them, but you can shape them a little bit if desired late in the winter. All right, let's move on to our second variety, Castle Rouge Ilex. Now, let's talk a little bit about blue holly to start out. Blue holly's botanical name, Ilex messervae, is named for its breeder, Kathleen Messerve. Did I say that right, Stacey?
Meserve.
Messerve. Let's call the whole thing off. All right, Ilex messervae and Kathleen Messerve, who wanted to develop a showy, English-style holly that could survive harsh winters. So she tinkered around with crossbreeding several species in her home and finally found success with a cross of Ilex aquifolium and Ilex rugosa. This breeding effort resulted in the creation of blue hollies, like you see here. They're characterized normally by their dark blue-green spiny-tipped foliage, like you can see here, but the great thing about them is they stand up to challenging weather, unlike the English holly. Another thing we know about holly is it's dioecious, right? The male pollinators generally, they're not as showy as those female holly that we all love. They have those red, beautiful berries in the winter time. So we thought it was about time someone took inspiration from Miss Messerve and developed a male variety that's showy enough for a prime spot in the landscape, and that is Castle Rouge Blue Holly. All season long, new growth emerges as a glossy red burgundy color before transitioning to deep green, and once winter comes, those leaves will turn a deep dark burgundy. This is nice and hardy down to USDA Zone 5, and because it's a male plant, Castle Rouge will serve to pollinate the whole rest of the Castle series, as well as other female blue hollies. So let's put that in a prime spot in our landscapes, along with our red berry producing hollies. Absolutely gorgeous. Moving on. Kodiak Red 2.0 Durvilla. Isn't she beautiful? We've made great strides in our breeding of Durvilla with the Kodiak series. Kodiak 2.0 is an improvement over the coloration of Kodiak Red, which you might have already heard about. This has deeper red foliage that stays red all season long. Now, we named it 2.0 because, let's say if you're a landscaper and you've already spec'd Kodiak for a project, you know you're still getting Kodiak. This is just an improved version over the old red, so it's going to replace red in our series. Now, let's talk about Durvilla a little bit. Durvilla is a genus that's native to North America. The Kodiak series is Durvilla lirnicera, commonly known as bush honeysuckle. It's called honeysuckle because it refers to the tuberous nature, the little tubes of Japanese honeysuckles, but that is the only way that it's similar. Durvilla unlike Japanese honeysuckle, Durvilla aren't a vining plant. It doesn't share the same invasive qualities of Japanese honeysuckle because Durvilla are self-sterile, and what that means is the seed set requires pollination from a nearby plant. So the seeds that might get carried into natural areas by, say, birds or other wildlife, they're not going to easily germinate. So for this reason, we prefer to call the whole series by its botanical name Durvilla, rather than bush honeysuckle, just to avoid any confusion. Durvilla tolerates dry shade, is drought tolerant once established, and it's super duper tough. It's also well adapted to fire-prone habitats because it can regenerate from underground stems if destroyed by fire. Kristina agrees, she's nodding in agreement.
I wrote an article about fire-proof shrubs. I was like, yep.
Yeah, if you plant this, the whole point is you know it's going to live. It's a super hardy, easy to grow plant, hardy down in USDA Zone 3. Kodiak Red 2.0 Durvilla is similarly sized to other plants in the Kodiak series, 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. These are great plants in the landscape. Colorful straight branches make thanks Adriana. Make nice straight branches, so they're great filler for cut flower arrangements as well. So if you're growing a cutting garden or you have a cut flower business, these are great filler. Nice big plants, beautiful colorful foliage. Okay, now let's move to Fireball Seedless Euonymus. Now I know, when most people hear the words burning bush, they immediately think invasive. But Fireball Seedless Euonymus is the first and the only seedless, sterile, non-invasive burning bush on the market. And that's why it's part of the In Check program, which identifies species that have been developed to be seedless, sterile, or have low seed sets with that In Check logo that you can see on the screen. That will be on every tag that's in the In Check program. At Proven Winners Color Choice, we're working really hard to address the problem of invasive species, and this is just one answer to that problem. Fireball Seedless is already a Green Thumb Award winner, and it brings all the durability and blazing red color that you'd expect from Euonymus elatus, but with no risk of spreading into wild areas like conventional burning bush. Now, at Proven Winners Color Choice, you're going to see us use the phrase trialed and tested a lot. And this plant was definitely put on trial before we released it. In side-by-side testing, Fireball Seedless produced 8 seeds on one entire plant versus 1,330 seeds on just one branch of a conventional burning bush. Plus, in that testing, they weren't able to get those 8 seeds to germinate. So for this reason, Fireball Seedless will be entirely replacing the original Fireball Euonymus in the Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs line. Fireball Seedless is a compact, low-maintenance shrub that grows 5 to 7 feet tall and wide, thriving in USDA Zone 4 to 8 in full sun to part shade. Now, what we need to remember again, like with all of Euonymus, and this one is just the same, more sun, more color. It's adaptable to most soils, drought tolerant once established. This is another excellent introduction from Dr. Tom Rainey and his crew at Mountain Horticultural Crops Research Station in North Carolina. All right, moving on. Sgt. Pepper Cornus alba. Sgt. Pepper Cornus is already an award winner in Europe, and the genus is the National Garden Bureau Shrub of the Year. Now I know this is not the typical species you think of when you think Year of the Dogwood, but it is a very exciting introduction. Now we've been working with Cornus with variegated foliage for a long time, and we finally found what we wanted in this Tatarian dogwood. The foliage of Sgt. Pepper dogwood starts out green and white, like you see in this picture, in the spring, with vivid pink tones that quickly take over. Then in summer, the green and white emerges again until the shorter nights of late summer usher in a return of that vibrant pink coloration. Now we're always looking for plants to offer more seasons of interest. So we spend a lot of time looking for good foliage and great form, and this plant really checks all those boxes for us. It has vivid color and very stable variegation. Plus, like other species of dogwood, it bears this beautiful red winter bark for winter interest. Overall, this is going to be a little bit larger than Ivory Halo, but still super manageable at 4 to 6 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet wide. Plus, the coloration is deeper with more red tones in the spring. Deer resistant, very hardy, down to USDA Zone 3. Great, great new dogwood. All right, moving on to Stay Classy, Prunus. From the University of Connecticut, breeder Dr. Mark Brand brings us Stay Classy, a compact ornamental form of Prunus sustaina. It's an improved, well-branched, lower-growing form of ornamental sand cherry. One of its best traits, Stay Classy has rich, dark purple foliage that holds its color even under cloudy conditions. And cloudy conditions are a little something we know about here in West Michigan. So it's been a strong grower for us. It has excellent container presentation, delivers reliable color and performance in the garden. Stay Classy has beautiful foliage and a loose habit, allowing the light to play in and amongst the branches. So it brings that dark color forward really beautifully and kind of eliminates that black hole that you can get in a garden sometimes when you use that deep dark foliage in your garden assortment. It bears these gorgeous white spring blooms that you see on the screen, and it's a great choice for adding color and structure to gardens and landscapes. Plus, it's super hardy, all the way down to USDA Zone 2. You may have seen Prunus Sistina before, but these earlier versions were based on an older cross, and believe it or not, no one had revisited the idea using better parents until Dr. Brand did. His breeding focused on developing a more compact plant with this nice naturally mounded habit. Now more than ever, we're looking for plants that not only thrive in the landscape, but also have strong retail appeal. And this variety really delivers in that respect as well. At just 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, it stays about half the size of conventional species. And it makes it perfect for container presentation at the garden center, and also for your gardens and landscapes. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm done already. That was so much fun. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Crimson Drager, and she is going to talk about vines and native species and spring blooming plants. Take it away.
All right, let's get started. So first up for vines, I have Fun Yellow Clematis. This is a new selection of clematis with cheerful golden flowers with elegant double petals that bloom from spring through midsummer. They give off a lovely grapefruit scent. The flowers stand out with their strong stems that won't snap easily, and the unique yellow flowers have a touch of lavender where they connect to the stem. This plant is perfect mixed in with perennials, great for covering fences, railings, and even mailbox posts. It's long blooming, flowers on old wood, so you don't have to prune it. And then next I have Kinsley's Ghost Honeysuckle. This is a favorite among gardeners, so you may recognize it, but it's new to our collection. Kinsley's Ghost is a non-invasive honeysuckle that can take on the rugged conditions of the West Coast mountain states. This plant stands out with its striking bracts that resemble eucalyptus leaves. The circular bracts are surrounded by flowers in early summer, and as the season progresses, the flowers give way to bright red berries. And next up is natives. This is Happy Face Orange Potentilla. This plant is a fantastic choice if you're looking to add some vibrant color to your garden. As a native species, this tidy shrub is well adapted to survive even the coldest climates, so even down to zones 2. One of the standout features of this plant is the orange blooms. Orange is actually the most difficult color to get in Potentilla, but after years of trialing and testing, we found one that meets our high standards. So the flowers start out a reddish orange and gradually fade to a soft orange at the end of the season. Illuminati Spice Mock Orange. This plant is compact, deer resistant, and perfect for zones 4 through 8. It's also one of the showiest and most fragrant mock oranges that we've seen. It smells just like orange blossoms. What sets this plant apart is its stunning, fragrant, double white flowers that bloom in early summer. This plant has been trialed and tested to ensure bigger, more abundant, better foliage that holds up handsomely all season. A nice habit that fits into residential areas. It gets about 4 feet wide and tall. So next I have Paisley Pup Dog Hobble. This is a deer-resistant broadleaf evergreen, ideal for shade gardens. The shrub features variegated foliage with new growth in pink, white, green, and yellow, which you can see on the next slide. There we go. Okay, Paisley Pup thrives in part shade with moist, well-drained soil that's slightly acidic. It's low maintenance and reliable for shade gardens or naturalized areas. In late spring to early summer, it produces these fragrant, tiny white flowers that attracts tons of bees and butterflies. And finally, I have spring blooming plants. So this is Bloomerang Ballet Lilac. Part of the Bloomerang series of reblooming lilacs, this lilac has pinkish purple fragrant blooms in spring and an encore performance later in the summer. This may be the strongest rebloomer yet. We had blooms on ours in Michigan until late October. I love this shrub. The blooms are so pretty in person, and they attract tons of butterflies and bees. It's super easy to grow. Like other lilacs, it's if ever browsed by deer, like never.
Can I just make a point too? This picture that you're looking at right here was outside our office last summer in August.
Wow.
And that is incredible.
And Natalie knows because that is very
Right
near
out my
her
window.
I'm like, I know.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, Alright, Sonic Bloom Punch Weigela. This is like an electric shrub. It's a new addition to our Sonic Bloom series of Weigela. They're known for their strong rebloom. What makes this unique is its smaller habit. So it gets just 2.5 to 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide, so it fits better in residential areas or your home garden. It's a showstopper for zones 4 through 8 and offers continuous waves of magenta pink flowers, has bronze foliage, and is also deer resistant. Yuki Kabuki Dutsia. Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
It is a great shrub for USDA zones 5 through 8. It grows about 2.5 to 4 feet tall and wide. This plant features bell-shaped pink and white flowers that cluster above its bushy mounded habit, creating a lovely display in spring. It's slightly irregular growth, fits well in various garden styles, but you can always prune it to be more neat if you prefer that. Yuki Kabuki is deer resistant, drought tolerant, making it easy to grow in different environments, and you can see in this picture right here the fall foliage, so it gets a beautiful color in the fall. Alright, that's it for me. Kristina, you can take it over.
And next, I will be talking to you about amazing warm climate shrubs. I loved that last picture. Fall foliage is like close to my heart. And now we're going to be talking about vibrant plants that are ready to stand the heat in your garden, out in the landscape, or on the garden center floor. So we will start with Brilliantina, Abelia grandiflora. This plant is so beautiful, and its main points of attraction are the foliage. We'll start with what it needs though. It needs to grow in full to part sun. It tolerates most soils, but it would prefer moist, well-drained soil. It grows 3 to 4 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide, so slightly wider than tall, and it maintains this fun springy habit by itself. If you want to prune it, you can in early spring, but we actually selected this plant because it produces fewer of those crazy long stems that you might have seen in Abelia. Those are called dog legs for fun, but this one does not create those, so you'll be able to manage it much more easily. Now, like I said, it is attractive for its foliage. The beauty is in the details with this plant. It's got this amazing watercolor-like variegation with that chartreuse and yellowy, that outside around the edge, and that pretty green on the inside. Gorgeous new growth. It's that like dusty orange color, all tied together with burgundy stems. Wow, that is a lot of color, and it's not over because it has a smattering of white flowers in the summertime, and those are supported by these really pretty kind of medium pink colored bracts. And so I think there's a picture of those next. And there they are. They look like leaves. If you've ever seen these, they look like leaves, but they're just a little, they're supposed to be insignificant, but in this plant they're showy, and they're so pretty. And so, whatever element you like best of this plant, burgundy stems, variegation, or these pretty white summer flowers, pull out one of those elements and emphasize it in the landscape with another plant. So maybe you like the yellow color in the foliage and that kind of carefree habit with its springy nature. Maybe you'd plant something like yarrow, Achillea, because there are a lot of beautiful options to choose from, and it too has kind of this abundant look. If you like the burgundy, maybe use something with burgundy flowers to draw out that color from the stems, like a big Miss Molly butterfly bush planted in the background with its like very deep flowers that are that color that you just want to bite into. Or white flowers in different shapes that will bloom at the same time, so maybe a rose, so that you have this pretty little echo to kind of emphasize the detail in this gorgeous plant. You can use it in groups to fill the border, in a mixed hedge, or as just a beautiful lush element in a container. It has so much going on that you don't even need to plant anything else with it, which is kind of fun. It's deer resistant, attracts pollinators, and it's fragrant. So if you did plant it in a container, you could put it somewhere that you could smell that yummy smell. Next, we have another Abelia. This is Poco Loco. Oh, I forgot to mention, our last Abelia was bred by Clemens and Lena Kaisers, and this Abelia was bred by Megan Matai. And it grows in full depart sun too. It tolerates most soils like the other, but if it had its druthers, it would be in moist soil. It's smaller. It grows just 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, and it maintains this globe-like habit all by itself. It looks very tidy naturally, but you can prune it if you would like in the early spring because it flowers on new growth. Speaking of flowers, it has a great flower set. It's very heavy, super fragrant. These pale pink flowers are supported by more of those kind of pretty dusty rose colored bracts, and its new growth is kind of that like warm color too, on top of its kind of limey foliage in the summer. But you might be thinking, wow, this plant looks so elegant. Why is it called Poco Loco, which is Spanish for a little crazy? Because of this amazing spring color. So it emerges bright yellow and orange, and just totally unexpected. It's a great way to start the growing season. I would recommend pairing it with similarly colored Delosperma, maybe, for a pretty low growing show. If you don't want it to take up too much space, Delosperma will stay nice and tight to the ground, but it will also have that punch of color. So you could use it as a low hedge, low edging, or grouped in a parking lot where if it gets stepped on, it's not going to be too hurt about it. And it will have lovely fragrance like its other sister Abelia introduced in 2025. It's deer resistant, attracts pollinators, and that fragrance really cannot be underestimated. Next, we have Perfecto Mundo Fuchsia Carpet. In a perfect world, which is Perfecto Mundo, we would have azaleas blooming more. We want more of these vibrant, juicy flowers, and that's just what the whole series does. And this plant is no exception. It is great for its double season of interest. So it has 2 full seasons of flowers from one plant. And for that reason, it likes to grow in full sun, also can grow in part sun. But to get it to perform at its absolute best, it needs to grow in moist, acidic soil. If it's not acidic soil, it just isn't as robust. It doesn't look as nice. And Perfecto Mundo Fuchsia Carpet. You're thinking carpet, low growing, and that's true. It's small and wide. It gets 1 to 2 feet tall and 2 to 2.5 feet wide. It likes to be trimmed after it blooms the first time in the spring, and that will help it have a really amazing rebloom later in late summer to the fall. Now, let's talk about these tiny little leaves that you see poking out from beneath these huge flowers. I love a garden's visual texture, and that is often referring to foliage or flowers. This plant, when it's not blooming in the summertime, has a fine visual texture. It stays interesting even though it doesn't have flowers. Those tiny little leaves look great when you pair them in a garden with other big dramatic features. So that's large foliage or large flowers. That's called coarse texture. So if you used it in the shade, you might pair it with another heat tolerant plant like oak leaf hydrangeas, or if you were gardening in a sunny spot, maybe you could use hardy hibiscus. They've got those big wide open flowers, and the eye would just be kind of entertained by that difference in visual texture. So you can use it as a flowering ground cover, as edging or in containers. And I think that the best part is that it'll look good all year round. This evergreen is disease resistant and it attracts pollinators. So that is a lot of goodness in one small plant, and there are no end of uses that you can employ in your garden. Next up, we have Estrellita Scarlet, or Estrellita, how a lot of people are going to pronounce it. So in Spanish, this is little star, and its common name, firecracker bush, for a reason. Wow, look at these impactful blooms. It needs to grow in full sun to create its most robust show. It likes well-draining soil, and it would rather be dry than wet. Just something to keep in mind for your own garden positioning. It grows 1.5 to 2 feet tall and wide. It takes to shaping very well because it blooms on new growth, so you can do that in spring if you would like. Now this plant is native to Southwest United States and to Mexico, so it's well adapted for the environment there. It has this incredible bloom period, I'm not kidding, from spring into fall, and it grows to maturity quickly, so this plant is robust. And it's worth actually growing even if you live in a northern place where you'd just be using it as seasonal color, because it's going to grow and flower and perform for you even if you're just using it for one season. You can use it as edging in mixed beds with perennials and annuals, in pollinator gardens, and in containers. It's truly a tough plant. Perhaps you would plant it with other brightly colored pollinator plants like a butterfly milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa. It's deer resistant, attracts pollinators, it's drought tolerant, and a great cut flower. So for those of us who like to bring a little bit of the garden inside, you might not have a formal cut flower garden, but this is a plant that you can snip a few flowers off from and bring inside with you, and nothing will be hurt. Like, the plant will be fine. Just a fun little bonus. Next, we have Just Chill Double Mauve. This was bred by Mike Farrow. It grows in full to part sun. It needs moist acidic soil to really perform its best. Now this plant grows taller than wide. It gets 5 to 8 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide. It can be trimmed in late winter if you want, because it flowers in autumn and kind of like a wintry time, which we could really use the color during that time. And it's kind of startling to see these flowers at that time because they so closely resemble peonies. These are semi-double flowers, and they have kind of like a bowl-like presentation. They have prominent yellow stamens right at the centers of those lush, gorgeous blooms, and the foliage is shiny. It's dark evergreen. I'm talking louder because I saw on the chat that it's just too soft. So I'm going to try and shout, which is not that hard because I'm excited about these plants. So we've got shiny dark evergreen foliage that is great as filler for flower arrangements. The flowers don't last that long in an arrangement, but I would say definitely go ahead and use some of the stems on this plant because the foliage lasts for quite a while in a container or in a vase.
Well, you know, back in the day, people used to dip them in paraffin wax.
Okay.
So the paraffin wax would dry on them, and that was how they would enjoy them indoors as cut flowers.
Oh.
So you can find instructions to do that online. It's a little bit of an old-fashioned practice, but definitely one that was
they
very
dip
popular.
the whole bloom in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like, I know that we talk about like camellias being great cut flowers, but no dice on an undipped camellia. So that is a story on our beautiful Just Chill Double Mauve. It is great as a specimen hedge, or thanks to its narrow footprint, it can actually stay within, it can go within an already established bed on your foundation to kind of break up all of those hard lines. It has that constant presence thanks to its evergreen foliage. And if you are thinking, okay, it's in a foundation, what does that mean? When you're planting something against a house or a building, it just helps soften the transition from huge structure to nothingness. It kind of makes the eye travel along the space a little easier. This is a great plant for that. It is best paired, in my humble opinion, with plants that will keep telling this vibrant color story, like you'd find with azaleas or anemones. Both of those are also very romantic looking plants, so I would pair it with those. It's deer resistant, disease resistant, and like I said, evergreen. Next, we have another camellia, also from the brilliant Mike Farrow. Now, I love this plant so much. I was joking with my panelists that this plant screams elegance if screaming were elegant. And I love it. I'm obsessed with it. So, why? It has all the same care requirements and pretty much the same habit. It's taller than wide habit. It's 5 to 8 feet tall, 3 to 5 feet wide, needs the same moist acidic soil, can be trimmed. The flowers are different though. It feels like these bright white petals, they're frilly, they're open. To me, it kind of feels like an open book that is displaying these gorgeous yellow stamens right at the center. It's such a gift to the garden. And the evergreen foliage, I feel, is a little bit of a cooler green. It too makes a great filler. It's nice and dense. It is worthwhile to clip a branch off because it will help you with a floral arrangement. It can be used as a specimen, as a hedge, and in borders where bulky structures might be. It kind of plays that contrast between that people really love between like something country and something industrial. So this is that soft element, and it would look great against like an iron support system where it brings elegance to any space. And speaking of elegance, I would pair it with other things, other classics in white if possible. So magnolias or hydrangeas, and choosing something like that will keep the garden telling the same story throughout the season, even when this is not in bloom. It's disease resistant, deer resistant, and evergreen.
I want to point out one more thing. One of the content creators we worked with asked me a question one time. I know you see on the screen here Camellia X. It is based from a Camellia sanguineana, which is important to some people, just so if you need that information.
Sanguineana or Sasanqua?
Sasanqua, sorry,
Okay.
Sasanqua.
Okay.
Yep,
Thanks, Natalie.
yeah, not japonica.
Not japonica. That would be winter blooming. Yes.
And now, here we are with the cheerful chiclet gold Tacoma stands. The common name for this is Esperanza, which means hope in Spanish. It was bred by Megan Matime and requires full sun to look its best. It will grow in pretty much any soil type. It is drought tolerant-ish when it's established, so after a year or so, it'll start to tell you when it needs some water if it's been a while. It grows taller than wide, so 3 to 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide. It takes to trimming well if you need to, but it does maintain a really compact habit, so that is usually unnecessary. It's kind of a nice upward shape and very organic feeling. So if you were to trim it, spring is great to do that because it will start to bloom on new wood in summer and fall. Summer through fall. And you might be thinking, this looks really familiar to me. It does look like trumpet vine, which is invasive, but it's just in looks alone. It is not related to trumpet vine in the least. It flowers just as profusely, and it's a fun shrub form of that abundant kind of tropical look. So maybe you could use it to replace an invasive trumpet vine. And actually, it is extremely opposite to invasive because this species is native to North America. And as such, it attracts our local pollinators, our native pollinators, and hummingbirds love this plant. It is just a beautiful little buffet for them. Its foliage is kind of like a consistent green, and you might think, why is that worth mentioning? Because sometimes there's variation within a plant, but if you want one note, you've got this gorgeous, consistent yellow on top of that really beautiful green. It's just such a lively, helpful green in the border. Keeps it cheery. It fills in a border very nicely, so if you were to plant it in a mass planting, that would look great in a border. If you just wanted to take up some space, but also feed some pollinators, this is a great plant for that. It works well in containers and in mixed beds with other plants that would also bring in and feed those pollinators like salvia, or million bells, calibrachoa, or bee balm, monarda. It's deer resistant and drought tolerant. A great little plant for some sunshine. Our next plant is Rock Steady. This was bred by Dr. Carol Robacker. Common name, chase tree, scientific name, Vitex agnes castus. This requires full sun to do all of that. It has so much look to it, and it will grow in any soil type. It's very drought tolerant once established. So really, just full sun and then this plant is ready to take off. I have not seen it looking bad in the trial garden ever. It grows usually taller than wide, and its growth range is 4 to 12 feet tall. Okay, I know that's quite a range. Because it may die back in the winter in colder areas, so it would only ever be able to get to a certain height each season if it died back each year. But in a warmer garden, it can reach quite a height. It doesn't have to be that way though. So it gets 4 to 5 feet wide, just worth mentioning. But it doesn't have to be that tall because it takes to pruning really well. You can prune it in late winter or early spring if you'd like, because it blooms later on in late spring and into fall. Now this isn't just some like span where I'm saying, no, it blooms sporadically from late spring into fall. This thing blooms 6 weeks longer than other varieties on the market. It is so worth its space in the garden. And it just draws in pollinators. It looks so striking. If you think you've seen these flowers before, they do look similar to like a butterfly bush, but they have their own whole look. I would pair this with other plants that have kind of that tall flower shape, maybe some hummingbird mint like Agasteki or red hot poker like Nymphophia. And you can use this as a specimen because it's so large in a hedge, like a mixed border hedge. Or you could just use it in a pretty little perennial bed, like I mentioned those other perennials. Mix it all together and let it be this joyful, whimsical place. It's deer resistant, drought tolerant, and like I said, attracts pollinators. It's got such a fun, whimsical look. It's got to attract the fun, whimsical animals that use our gardens. And last, yard-lined viburnum. So this was bred by Dr. Tom Ranney, and he clearly loves this plant so much that he is hugging it. And it is human-like because of, wow, look at that foliage, like that beautiful foliage in a remarkable habit. This is such an upright viburnum. It is, I mean, incredible. It is the end, there is no use of, their end of uses that you could have for this plant. It truly does grow much taller than wide, 6 to 12 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide, and it doesn't need pruning. You do not have to cut into this to give it that shape. If you had to, you could use, you could cut out Dogwood whenever you need to do that. Now, this plant is beloved for its many features. Not just any plant can receive a hug, because I would say that it has 3 distinct, beautiful features. The first is abundant blooms in the spring. And those are kind of fluffy and white. There are truly so many of these flowers. You will find pollinators just buzzing around. And those blooms result in berries. This plant is self-fertile. What's going on?
Nothing.
Okay. This plant is self-fertile. It will produce berries all by itself, but if you wanted to, you could have another viburnum in the garden, and it would probably produce a more abundant crop of berries. So you'd plant another viburnum of the species Awabuki or Siboldii. Those are 2 of the species that originated from. You don't need to do that though. It'll still produce the berries. And the most striking feature is this shiny, long evergreen foliage. It is perfect looking, and it's so dense that it makes a great hedge. You really can't see through this thing. You could play peekaboo with your neighbors, except for if you planted them really tight together, there would never be the boo. You can also use it in borders and foundations to soften the harsh lines of buildings, like I said, or in containers to provide a very stately look. Maybe you'd plant it next to doors or by your garage, but it would provide that like consistent evergreen polished look that you really depend on if you're a person who prizes elegance and performance. I would pair this with plants like allium or dahlias, or maybe a pugster white butterfly bush, all things that require the same growing conditions and kind of add to that, I feel, whimsical nature of an upright viburnum. They're elegant
And useful.
and useful. like this plant, elegant and useful. Now, I'm kind of sad to part with the view of this plant because it's so beautiful and it's also my last plant. It's disease resistant, deer resistant, and drought tolerant. It is no end of useful. And I suppose that means I'll have to hand it off to our last section with Stacey, hydrangeas, roses, and edibles.
I saw that someone was asking if we were going to cover hydrangeas, and this is Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, so you better believe that we are going to cover hydrangeas. So the first one that you're going to find at your garden center this season is the beautiful Wee Bit Innocent hydrangea, and this was developed by my friend and colleague Megan Matai. A really great innovation from her. Now I first want to talk a bit about the Wee Bit series. So the Wee Bit series, as its name implies, are smaller hydrangeas that save space and don't need pruning because they bloom on old wood and because they stay nice and short. So Wee Bit Innocent is about 2 feet tall by 2.5 feet wide. So this is a great plant for foundation planting or anywhere that you don't have a lot of space or you don't want a lot of height, but you want all of that amazing display of a big leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea macrophylla. So as you can see here, they are small plants that are florist quality, so like the kind of hydrangeas that you're going to find in your grocery stores and florists soon, but with landscape performance. So it's a great combination of those two things. Now, as you saw in the previous slide, this plant will be pink in neutral to alkaline soils. In acidic soils, it will be this beautiful pale blue to lavender color. Now this plant is really just going, so that color will deepen as the season progresses. But what you can also see here is that what makes Wee Bit Innocent so special is that the flowers are semi-doubled. So you get that little flower inside for just a little extra pop. And this is one of those plants that when you see it in bloom, you're just like, I have to have that. It is truly a beautiful and special big leaf hydrangea. So we do have a hardiness zone of USDA zone 5 on this. It is not a reblooming hydrangea. It will certainly perform well for you in zone 5 in a protected area, and it is heat tolerant through USDA zone 9. As you can see, another really special quality of this plant is very thick, glossy foliage. And not only is that really attractive in the landscape or as a cut flower, but it also means that it has a little bit more resistance to wilting than other hydrangeas because that kind of has like a thick coating that helps to conserve the moisture in the foliage so they don't wilt as much. Now that doesn't mean that you should go and plant it in full sun, especially if you live in a warm climate, but it is going to be a little bit more resistant to that summer wilting than a lot of other conventional big leaf hydrangeas are. Next up is Fairy Trail Green and Fairy Trail White Cascade hydrangeas. So these are the next introductions in the Fairy Trail series of Cascade hydrangeas. So the first introduction came a few years ago as Fairy Trail Bride, and this is the plant that is known as Runaway Bride in the UK and the EU. And when it came over here, we changed the name to Fairy Trail Bride to indicate that this is a cascade hydrangea with those elegant arching branches. Now what makes these two different than the original Fairy Trail Bride is that they are mop head hydrangeas. So Fairy Trail Bride is a lace cap with a beautiful large open flower, and these are mop heads, so you're going to see more of those sterile florets and you're going to get that nice rounded mop head look that so many people like. Now what makes Fairy Trail hydrangeas special is that, again, they're cascading. So they put out these long, elegant, arching branches, and they set a flower bud at every internode. So as the plants get larger, and these do reach, let's see here, 4 feet tall by 4.5 by 4 to 5 feet wide. So they kind of spread, they're more horizontal, but they set those flower buds all along so you get this like kind of lovely horizontal effect just covered in flowers. Now one thing that's really special about these as well is that they are the earliest blooming hydrangeas that you're going to find. So they're a great season extender. If you love hydrangeas as much as we do, you're going to want hydrangeas, you know, for all summer long, from early summer all the way through fall. And this is a great way to do that because you're not going to find one that blooms earlier. You can go ahead and change it there. So this is just a look at Fairy Trail Green with that beautiful marbly look in those florets. Now, when we introduced Fairy Trail Bride, we did have it at a hardiness zone of USDA Zone 6, heat tolerant through USDA Zone 9. We've since revised that down to USDA Zone 5, and I just want to provide a brief little bit of context on that. So we always knew that the Fairy Trail series was actually quite hardy, the plant itself. But the problem was that because they are so early blooming, that the flower buds are much more susceptible to spring frosts, even more so than a big leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea macrophylla was, because they're closer to blooming since they bloom earlier. But what we've since discovered is that as long as you plant these in a part shade condition, and especially part shade in the morning, so you want them to be shaded in the morning in the spring, so that when those spring frosts, if and when those spring frosts and freezes do occur, those ice crystals that come onto the flower bud, they don't melt fast when the sun hits them as the sun comes up. Instead, because they're in part shade or shade, they melt slowly, and that helps to conserve the flower tissue and prevent that damage. So if you want to be super careful, it's always a good idea if those frosts or freeze threaten to just go ahead and drape a towel or a blanket or something like that overnight. But we found that morning shade in the spring really helps to conserve the flower buds and give you better performance. And before we move on to the next one, I do want to mention that the Fairy Trail series was developed by Ushio Sakazaki from Japan. And he is the breeder behind the Vista Bubblegum Petunia from Proven Winners. So you know that he is a very beauty and performance driven plant breeder, and that's what you will see in the Fairy Trail series as well. So those are all of our new hydrangeas. We're gonna move on to our beautiful new roses, starting with the Oh So Fabulous, Oh So Easy and Fuego Rose. And you can see that back here as well. This is one of those roses that when it was in our trials, everybody was like, oh my gosh, what is that? I love that. Now, I am no shrinking violet in the garden. My taste tends more to the bold, bright colors, so I adore this plant. I love these bright reds and orange and yellows and oranges. So you can see in the flower buds there that when it starts out, they're kind of that ketchup and mustard, red and yellow look. And then when they open, the color starts to turn to this really pretty coral with that yellow inside to just give it that en fuego special look, which means on fire in Spanish. So it really looks like it's glowing from within. Now, this is one of our Oh So Easy roses. These are disease-resistant landscape roses. So even though, especially on Oh So Easy and Fuego, the flowers look like hybrid tea roses, you can see especially on that bud in there that's just starting to open, they just have that classic rose look. But it's a landscape shrub rose, so that means good disease resistance, it means it blooms all summer without deadheading, and it's just overall a more durable and easier to grow plant that doesn't need the maintenance that people associate with hybrid tea rose. And like all of our roses, it is on its own roots, so you don't even have to worry about grafting. And that's one of the reasons why this is hardy to USDA Zone 4 and heat tolerant through USDA Zone 9. Now this is a little bit bigger than the rest of the Oh So Easy series. This one gets to be about 3 to 4 feet tall by 3 feet wide. So this is going to be more of a back of the border plant, a hedge rose, or a landscape rose that you can just incorporate into your landscape. And of course, like all roses, this is a full sun plant. All right, next up, the beautiful, luscious Flavorette or Flavorite paired rose. And these are really interesting roses. These come to us from a breeding program in Serbia and in Europe and the UK for that matter, and other cultures. It's very common to use roses in culinary applications and in food. You see that certainly in Persian cuisine and throughout Europe. It's not so common here in the US, and so by bringing these beautiful roses over, we're trying to change that and introduce this unique use for roses. So Flavorette paired, obviously as the name implies, has a bit of a pear flavor. Our initial introduction in the series was Flavorette Honey Apricot, and that has, of course, a honey apricot flavor. And so all of the roses that they selected are for culinary qualities, and not just these unique flavors, but also their texture. And unless you've actually eaten a rose petal before, that might not make a huge difference to you, but when these are fresh, they have a soft, lush quality. It's very pleasant to eat and to bite into. So you can use these to garnish salads. They're fine mixed in with salads. You can eat the whole thing. They're beautiful on cakes and sweets, but you can also use the petals in various applications like flavoring sugar, making syrup. There's all sorts of wonderful things that you can do. And in fact, the breeding program where we got these from Serbia made a fabulous cookbook that we can put in the links. And if we don't answer any of your questions right now, we will come back and put all the links into the chat after the presentation is over, which it almost is. So please bear with us as we just wind this up here. So like all Proven Winners ColorChoice roses, this is going to be disease resistant. It does not need deadheading in order to flower all summer. So even though it is an edible rose, it still contains a lot of those really modern performance features that we insist on here because we want growing roses to be fun and easy, and we want to just dispel a lot of those myths that people have about roses being fussy plants. And it's just as beautiful, as you can see, in the garden as it would be in the kitchen. And this also makes a nice cut flower. So as we finish up with the roses, we're finishing with an edible rose because we're moving into our 2 new edible plants that we're introducing this year. And number 1 is Taste of Heaven Blackberry. Now, if you're anything like me, you did not really consider yourself a huge fan of blackberries because probably the only times you had them were like at hotel buffets, and perhaps you got them at the grocery store, like when they were on sale or something like that. And they always had this big core in the center, which was very unpleasant to eat. So when we wanted to introduce a blackberry, we focused on flavor more than anything else. And so our new plant development manager, Tim Wood, went down to the University of Arkansas, and he tasted literally dozens and dozens of different blackberries before he decided which one was tasty enough to join the program. And Taste of Heaven is it. And you really will notice a difference in the flavor and the sweetness and just the overall taste of this blackberry. It really is like nothing I have ever tasted. It totally changed my mind about blackberries. So this is a thornless blackberry, which is another good thing. If you've ever grown raspberries, and blackberries are very closely related to raspberries, those thorns make maintenance and harvesting less fun than it ought to be. And so these are really, really easy to grow and really easy to care for. And you can even let your kids go out there and pluck the berries and they won't get scratched up and come in crying. Kristina's happy about that for her little ones. So these are what is known as floricane blackberries, and I'm not going to dive too far into this because it's a lot for this live stream, but all the information is on our website. But basically what that means is that these set their fruit on second-year canes. So you harvest off of canes that were created in the previous season, and at the end of that season, when the harvest is over, those canes that the fruit was just produced on are going to die, and so you want to just cut them back and let the new canes, which are going to bear fruit for next year, start to get all of that sun and air and light and let them to mature. They're very easy to grow. That might sound a little bit confusing, but we've got you covered on our website, as well as, of course, on the plant tag, all the information that you're going to need to know. Again, these come from the University of Arkansas. They are hardy, but because these floricanes, or these second-year canes, do need to survive winter, they aren't quite as hardy as raspberries, but very heat tolerant and easy to grow. They don't strictly need staking. We've grown them without stakes here, but they do benefit from it if you have some way to do that. That just keeps the fruit up, open, available, easier to find, easier to pick, and of course it keeps the plant easier to maintain as well. So finally, you'll see that both of these plants, the Taste of Heaven Blackberry and this one we're moving on to right now, Splendid Blue Blueberry, have this Flavor Fest insignia. And right now, these are the only 2 plants in our Flavor Fest program. But what Flavor Fest sort of denotes is that these varieties are selected for superior taste. We really wanted our edible plants in the Proven Winners ColorChoice line to not just be beautiful, I mean that's important, but we wanted the best tasting fruit. And there's a lot of different reasons that people can grow fruit, but we wanted the best quality, the sweetest, most unique and tastiest flavors, and that's what you get with these two. And with Splendid Blue, in addition to those big beautiful berries, you get gorgeous blue foliage that really stands out in the landscape, as you're going to see in these next couple photos. This is what it looks like in fall, so it gets amazing. That is such a pretty picture. It's got the morning dew on it, really distinctive color. And then this is what it looks like in the landscape. So you can see that even outside of its flowering, even outside of its fruiting, this is an extremely useful plant that's going to pull its weight in the landscape without just looking like it's your, fruit patch out in the back 40. This is a landscape-worthy blueberry that's really going to accentuate your home and garden. Now, it doesn't need a pollinator. It will set fruit without a pollinator, but it will set more fruit and bigger fruit if a pollinator is available. So you can use our Let's Dance Sky Dew blueberry, which is our ornamental blueberry with the golden foliage. Or if you have other blueberries, or like us here in West Michigan, just live in an area with a lot of blueberries around, you can count on those to do the pollinating work for you. So that is our last plant. Now, before I wind up here, I do just want to give a huge shout out to Adriana, our videographer, for putting this YouTube Live together and monitoring it and keeping us all together here, and of course to Shannon, who put together this beautiful presentation and is at her desk monitoring all the comments. Shannon is our designer and she does a great job, so thank you both, and thank all of you for participating. So I know that was fast, I know that was a lot of content, but you can find everything that you need on our website, which is provenwinnerscolorchoice.com. If you have any questions, want to see more pictures, videos, get more information about how to grow it, it is all right there. Now, these plants will be at your garden center this spring, but of course no garden center is going to carry all of them. So if you have something that you've picked out of this presentation, or maybe more than one thing that you really love and want to find, let your garden center know. They can order it in from the grower who supplies them with our plants if they aren't planning to carry it already. So, is there anything else we have to add?
No, I think just thank you guys for being so patient. This is our first live stream. We're learning a lot as we go along. We're looking forward to improving it. I think every time we do it, we always get better.
All right, so thank you again, all of you. We hope you have a wonderful weekend and, of course, a great spring. If you have any questions, we're here to help. Just visit provenwinnerscolorchoice.com. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.